Mackenzie Johnston with Tri-State Livestock News, bringing you discussions concerning fair cattle markets. Today we have the opportunity to chat with Hank Klosterman of David City, Nebraska. Hank, to start off with, can you just tell me a little bit about your background, where you're located, and your involvement within the cattle industry?
Yeah, so I'm actually a fifth generation farmer, feeder, rancher from East Central Nebraska. That's where my foothold comes from, is my family's been here producing livestock and crops, row crop, for a long time. And that's where I got started, but my current, employment is that I do cattle procurement for several feedlots in Kansas, Texas, and Nebraska, and a few in Iowa, so most of my days spent buying cattle.
What do you think are the major issues standing in the way of fair cattle markets? There have been a few people that have recently said that we're out of the woods when it comes to these cattle market issues, as we have seen the markets come back fairly strong over the past few months. Do you think we're out of the woods with all these issues?
Yeah, I think we're far from being out of the woods. I think the gap that we've created back in the spring is just setting up to be a contra-seasonal market, and so I think we'll revisit some of our uncurrentness here in the near future. But I would tell you, going forward, the number one issue that I see is that we just lost packing capacity. You know, it comes down to one issue: leverage. You know, when they closed Plainview, Brawley, Denison, and Emporia, as an industry, we should have been more progressive and keep a close eye on the market manipulation going forward. But what happened is that we turned the market into the biggest bull market in history following the drought. And so there was that massive shift in leverage that we said, hey, we're putting it out of sight, out of mind, never a bad day. And, you know, that's coming back to bite us in the butt. So I think with the lack of leverage in the packing capacity, we've drained the cash trade. And the cash trade was our big leverage point. Now, will we get that back? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Absolutely. I'm a big believer in cattle cycles. You know, the history of the cattle market, the 125 years of history that you can look at in the cattle market, there's always cycles, and they come in 7, 10, and 35-year cycles. And a lot of it, outside of a few droughts, is money flow. You know, this market is the worst it's been since 35 years ago, the dairy buyout. And what that did is that started you into the next cycle. It was monetary. You know, people looked at it, and it was all money flow, and it strained the ranchers and culled the herd. I think that's exactly what we're doing right now. You know, people had X amount of cows in expansion phase, and we overgrew packing capacity. Well, you look at what we're going through right now, and there hasn't been enough incentive or breaks in the market for the rancher to actually say, I'm going to add more females. We've just been in a constant culling pattern. And so I think that's going to gain us leverage with better demand in the future and tighter numbers. So I think it'll change.
So you talk about packer concentration. Do you think there's any solutions out there that can be implemented and achieved to solve that issue?
Yeah, you know, adding packing capacity is probably one of our biggest answers to it. You know, we look at it in, I would tell you, when you get a concentration like you have in the big four, there's no entry point in the market. It's almost impossible for even a producer's cooperative with their own cattle supply to come in and compete. And competition is dictated not only by moving the middle cuts, but by moving every inch of that animal. You know, go to the off-haul and drop value, that's huge. You know, it's worth $7 a hundredweight today, and that's the profitability of the plant. And if we go back into tighter numbers, you know, this extreme profitability in the packing sector is going to go away. So I see it as this way, is if there's ever a time to add packing capacity, why not now? We just watched them put $30 billion into the CCC. What part of that could be available for cooperatives? You know, producers to come out and say they're going to build their own packing plant, and they got an advantage because they're not some giant corporation. They're a cooperative of producers. You know, why not incentivize those guys to come into the marketplace and give them a level playing field?
What are your thoughts on Senator Grassley's 5014 legislation?
Yeah, so at first, I was much like any other producer that was struggling. You know, we need change. That was my number one thought, and it seemed to be the best thing out there. But, you know, looking forward, my big concern with it is that it's almost a knee-jerk reaction, and it needs to be tuned to fit what we think the future could be. And I say that because I deal with so many larger feeding conglomerates, you know, in the South, But I can tell you, if they're going to keep their incentives and are forced to trade on cash, there's going to become a way where those producers essentially turn in their cash show list to get their kickers. A lot of them use the futures market, and so when they go to trade cash, they're going to have an agreement knowing what that show list is between the packer and the producer before that week comes or that 14-day window comes. And so they're going to make it as simple as a basis trade that's going to be like turning their cattle in. Now, is that advantageous for them? Yeah, because they get a good hedge pull. They don't have to go off rolling averages. I think it makes the market more competitive. But when we put government intervention or regulation on an industry and a mandate, I just am fearful that we'll have to go back and reverse that at some point. And so I am of the mindset, it needs to be soon, because I think that we don't want to lose, our fight right now and go in and institute something, but it needs to be something that we can tweak. And I don't think that we're there yet.
A few weeks ago at NCBA summer meetings, they passed policy to increase negotiated cash trade through a voluntary approach. Do you think a voluntary approach will make it happen?
I've talked with a lot of my friends, colleagues. They're looking at it and they've had plenty of good ideas, but I don't know that there's a lot of follow through on it. We've talked about a market maker program, which I thought was a great way to look at it. Is that you trade cash trade, you have incentive, and the formula guy has to donate in, and that dollar goes back to the cash trader. Do I think that could work? Yes, but what's the incentive for the packer to transfer funds or make up that pool? And so is it really effective in the long run? I just think that right now, I can tell you what the industry is. We overgrew the cow herd over capacity, so everybody has been scrambling for a slot.
Right.
Their concern is to get cattle killed. So of course they're going to want to go away from cash trade, and the packer has manipulated that way. They've pretty much people in a scare tactic of, if you commit cattle with us, you'll get them killed. If you don't, you're going to get left behind. We look at it, and they've had plenty of tools to do that. And they've used that to the point that they can go out and manipulate price outside of the 5-state average. It's not uncommon that they get a ton of commitments, and then you look at where it's priced off of next week's average. Well, that week they might go out and buy very few cattle. You can point fingers at a couple majors. That's exactly what their tactics are at certain times of the year.
So you speak of the packers. What are your thoughts on the DOJ investigation investigating our Big Four?
Looking at that, I was disappointed with the results of the first investigation. My honest opinion, I think the DOJ and the USDA are going to delay this next report until the market changes, and then they can give it the same objectionable report. I can go back to say this, now that I'm not involved. I was on a phone call with Sonny Perdue back in the spring, and I was just a listener on that call. He made a valid point that we have to have factual and an indisputable argument, but he had a lack of conviction, I guess, in his message and, in our cause and for the fire investigation. And it leads me to believe that we won't yield the findings that are favorable to the producer. I just think it's going to be another mundane report that pushes the can down the road, or the market gets better and they say, hey, look back to, your CFAP money you got, praise us for that. And look, this is a free market. Let's just not say that we're trying to stop American greed here. And so I look at it from that as that it's something that we dang sure did a great job from a small producer standpoint to rally our representatives to go out and actually represent us and try and be effective. But, we got big hurdles to cross here with government agencies that I just don't think will yield us the results we want.
You mentioned the CFAP payments. Obviously, those payments were needed as producers have been hurting in a bad way ever since the pandemic hit. However, there are some folks saying that these payments are just inching our industry closer to becoming a subsidized industry like we've seen with the grain industry. What are your thoughts on this?
It depends upon a lot about, our cycles and presidents and their parties. Because if you look at it, if a Democratic president were to win, which, whether it comes in the next term or the term after, we've obviously had a lot more success in agriculture with a Democratic president. Yep. But I'm fearful that in the next one, they're going to regulate it so heavy that they're going to regulate it on the one side and then try and incentivize you on the other side with subsidies. And so you get to the point where you have to eat out of their hand, essentially. It's been the goal of their party since history, since their creation to do that.
Yep.
And so when you look at it, I think that the CFAP money was absolutely necessary for where we're at. You look back to the, in '85, we didn't get anything after the dairy buyout.
Mm-hmm.
Was it necessary? No, we were in a different situation, different time. It was well needed by a lot of producers, but I also think that it was a system where it was kind of once in a lifetime money for people, and it was kind of a synthetic injection into the market, and I was scared that it would manipulate the futures market, especially in the way that you buy feeder cattle. It was something that could distort our market. So I wasn't in agreement of the start, but I look at it, and I've always been a person of competition and helping neighbors. It really helped some of the guys around here. I've always been a big risk manager, and so going through this, I've probably taken advantage of the market and the basis more than a lot of people in our area, but it was needed by a lot of the small producers. And I think the cap was necessary because, for somebody to come in and be able to take a few $1 million out of the deal, it would have been completely unfair.
Earlier this spring, President Trump made the statement that he wanted to cut off all trade deals where we import cattle into the United States. What are your thoughts on imports of cattle and beef?
The imports of live cattle, I've always been kind of against. My first initial reaction is I'm a patriot. We should be able to self-sustain. And it is such a touchy topic of beef imports because we have to have a product that's marketable at a price point. And so I believe in the safest product and the best product for the consumer. Well, if you're talking about that, obviously you get rid of imports. Mm-hmm. They don't have the same food and safety standards that we do. We obviously produce a superior product. The problem with our superior product is it's high choice. It comes with the higher fat content. And when we saw during the pandemic where we got so tight on lean trim, it got to a point where we had to go into the select rounds and ends to make up for that lean trim. And so I thought it made our product unaffordable. Yeah. And that's what we need. We need an affordable product. Now, I would tell you it's such an undecided decision for myself because until we can meet the demand of the lean trim market, at this point, I think we need to import a safe product, but I don't think it should be an all-out, open doors, you import from wherever, these companies just use the cheapest damn product they get. Well, I think you should make it a level playing field, whether it's going back to increasing food safety standards for that product, making it harder to get, or just leveling the playing field on price. I think that's about the only way you can go about it and have kind of a global look at it and keep a price point.
So you mentioned making our product affordable. We've seen consumers be price gouged terribly. Obviously, prices have come down somewhat in the grocery stores. However, beef really shot up there. Do you think there's a chance that we could have priced ourselves out of the product by the gouging that was done to consumers?
Absolutely. Our segment is that we've lost so much leverage. We're at the mercy of everybody else. I mean, who would have fathomed a market where we could see packer profits at $1,500, $1,600 in an actual market where they could sell beef for 3 times what it was the prior month? And it showed up in the stores. And obviously, people had a little extra money in their pocket for a limited time, but we knew that lag would be coming where the product was going to price itself out of competitiveness. Now, people aren't going to shut off their grills. They're staying at home more, so there is that demand. But I'm nervous about the disposable income coming forward, that there's that recessionary lag coming forward where our product becomes, a luxury item. And so I look at it and I can't believe for the life of me that you would look up at the next 2 segments of the industry and they think that that's sustainable. A retailer going out and saying, he's going to scramble for the product. The problem, not only with the packer buying cattle from the producer, is the fact that he can control the box price on the other end. Cold storage is such a faulty report that, he could have massive amounts of cold storage. And at the same time, all it says is, hey, we're limited on product, and it starts this price craze. He does the same thing on the producer side. He says, hey, we're limited on space. You're 3 weeks out on getting your cattle killed. Well, it makes everybody dump their cattle because they're like, I got to have them gone. And so I think that the price gouging is real, and it goes right back to the consumer. And so, from the retailer standpoint, he's probably still a little bit of a middleman, but it points back to one segment of the industry where lack of competitiveness is at.
Do you think fake meat products are a threat to the cattle industry?
there's something that it could put a dent in the industry, but not a big one. Because when you look at it, we've sat here and fought for food safety against whatever the heck you want to call it, non-GMOs and organic. And we try to create a product that's healthy and better for the consumer. And now all of a sudden we're going back into saying that we're going to help the environment by creating lab-based meat that obviously doesn't look to be that, or the impossible meat also, it doesn't look to be that healthy for the consumer. So heart disease is the number one killer in this country. You look at our healthcare system that's flawed, and all of a sudden we're going to turn to a product that couldn't be worse for your heart health. I just think that it's the same rhetoric from one side of the aisle that is going to be phased out by the silent majority. And so the consumer's his demand is always going to prevail that it's better, to go out and eat lean, nutritious beef.
More than ever, consumers want to know where their food originates from. What are your thoughts on Emcool?
I love the idea that we can showcase our product and be proud of our superior product. I mean, look at millions of other products that get a flag stamped on it, and it's pretty easy to be traceable in a cheap way. Would people make the choice to buy a better, safer product that's homegrown? Yeah, they would. But I think where we're going is it scares me about household income, and when it all comes back to price point. Then if the economy's doing good, you got more disposable income, you're going to make that choice for a better product. The best damn labeling system I've ever seen is Smart Chicken. That guy was a genius. Yeah. He called it Smart Chicken, and he just did better practices to label the product. And you can look at the difference of what sells in the grocery store. So by putting a product in USA on it, could it sell better? Absolutely. But it sells better at the point that people have money in their wallet. So I think that if we are going to institute it, we have to come up with a way that all segments of the industry pay for it. Not just the producer. That was the last time, is that it cost the producer $30 million. Well, why the heck didn't we go out and look at an option where the producer stopped having to carry the bulk of the load to market the product to the consumer? Where's the people in between?
There has been a lot of talk recently about RFID ear tags. What are your thoughts on implementing those tags into our industry?
I think it'll benefit the producer. It comes down to the cost, always. But I think that's where the industry is trending, is that we're more of a tech-savvy industry, and do we want to evolve? And if we want to evolve, we obviously got to go. RFID becomes an issue like we're seeing right now, is that are we going to get in front of this deal and actually take it on and adhere to it, or are we going to say that we're cowboys from the Wild West and we're never going to adhere to it? I think that it's just trending that way. I see it as a cost. And so, when I'm minding my bottom line, I hate to think of it, but I feel like it's going to be the next thing that we're going to have to do in this industry and evolve our industry. I think there's benefits from it, but I also see it as a cost.
What are your thoughts on the expanded CME live and feeder cattle future limits that will be implemented on October 5th?
Well, I tell you what, this is a big issue for me. So, being the fact that I've worked with a lot of producers to try and, I guess, critique or repair the contract, I advocate the producer side of it because I use it every day, and I am a producer, and I think that expanded limits are a great way to attract the long. We're trying to do everything we can to attract the long back to the marketplace. And what we've done is we've manipulated the contract ourselves with the specs. From north to south, the south says, we don't want the choice spec to be that high, but the data says that the actual choice spec is higher. And it should be higher, and it should reflect the data so that the long comes in and says, okay, if I get delivered on, I don't have to pay all these premiums. The best damn grid out there is to deliver your cattle. Seems to be a flawed contract right there. And so when you're adding specs to it that essentially they constrain the producer, I'm comfortable with where we're at with the limits currently because of the margin requirement. Yeah. I feel like if we get into an extreme market, sure, it'll make the market run with the long, but it can do it on the short side too. Other markets got circuit breakers in it. The problem with the beef contract is that we have used our own human interference and not just the data to critique it so much that it's sent essentially further from the actual data that it's not getting traded properly. And so I think continuing to do more things to the contract is just ultimately going to make it trade so far away from the actual what it should be, the actual physical product, that it becomes a pork belly contract.
There is currently a petition circulating to bring about a referendum for the beef checkoff. What are your thoughts on this?
I think we need to research and promote our product. And if that goes away, I think the voluntary contributions simply won't cover the bill to do that. And so that scares me, that we think our product's so marketable that we don't use a resource to do something to promote our product like we're doing now. Now, do I think there's flaws in it? Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lack of transparency, and that we're in a time where there needs to be reform across the whole industry. And if there's enough producers pointing their finger in one direction, why not look at it? You know, my opinion's probably neutral on it, and I say, hey, I want to step back and not be a part of the conversation. But if there's enough people saying we need to do something different, we probably do need to look at it, and there's probably better ideas out there. That's the way I see it, is that I'm all about change right now if it's going to happen. We're at a pivotal point.
We've seen vertical integration in our hog and poultry industries. Do you think there's a chance we could see it happen to the cattle industry?
Yes, straight away. Like I said, we go back to being at a very pivotal point in history in this cattle industry. We are literally at a historic point given the market fluctuation and the circumstances. And so I think if we don't take action to fix the concentration and fix our futures contract to get leverage back, we stand losing the vital players in our industry that make the market. It goes back to the people that do the bulk of the cash trading. It goes back to being able to place cattle from north to south. You know, what happens when we look at it, and my fear of vertical integration is that, sure, I work with bigger feedlots and they can take over more market share, therefore I can market them more cattle, and it seems to be something that's lucrative for my career. And I like selling to the big boys. There's some great people, there's some efficiencies in the way they do things, but going forward, what scares the heck out of me is that when the hogs went to the way they were, there were so many different ways in a cash settled contract that you could, manipulate the market. And not only that, is they went into where the final straw or the death of it was when they started telling them what kind of pigs they could produce, what kind of pigs they could breed. When it comes down to it, it says you have to use these type of cows, these type of bulls to get this product, or else we're not going to buy from you. I think that if it ever comes down, I think that we should try to avoid that and do everything we can to avoid that side of vertical integration.
Do you think the industry has worked through the backlog of cattle that people have been talking about for months?
Yeah, I think we ramped up kills fast enough. Now, is the backlog there? Yeah, absolutely it is. Have we gained some of the currentness back? Yeah, I think we looked at it and everybody overreacted that this was 1 million head of cattle backed up, and it was very daunting. We are oversupplying the market right now at this point. Year-over-year supply is bigger. So I look forward that we're going to get some demand back. We need travel to open up. That's going to help with restaurant demand. This country's got to open back up, and that's going to help our movement of our product at the end. But I think that there's still that second wave of uncurrentness, or what we're going to say a backlog of cattle. I think right now we're looking at it as we knew that this is what would happen. We had a gap in placements, a huge gap in placements. So right now it feels like we're current. If you look in the north, there is not a whole lot of cattle on the show list. And I've sold cattle in Kansas here this last week, and you got a regional out of Omaha, Nebraska buying cattle down in southwest Kansas. Tell me they aren't tight in the north. So we do have that currentness, and I think that backlog's coming. It scares me, but I think for where we're at, we ramped up kills faster than what we thought we would. And so we just got to keep incentivizing them to kill. And that's going to take away a little bit of our leverage. But going forward, we'll weather the storm. Nothing stays the same. The cattle market's always changing. It's easy to be doom and gloom right now, and it'll probably get worse before it gets better. But I think that we'll get through that supply of cattle. We always do.
What's your outlook for calves this fall? Do you think this market's going to hold strong?
I think contra-seasonally, if the market's trending the way it is, we've seen some pretty good strength in calves. Now, the mindset is that everybody wants $1.70 for a 6-weight calf, and I get it. You got to ask as much as you can. Is that a good break even for the feeder? Absolutely not. Even with the cheapest corn we got and cheap feed, I don't think that he's willing to bite that off, even with his CFAP money. He's not willing to spend that. So if I look at it, we've started into a lot of contract calves ourselves, contracting a lot of those middle 6-weight calves for October delivery around that 150 mark. In this last little bit of push here, we've seen some of those video calves be $10 higher than that. It's always, it's history that the video sales seem to have some pretty good strength, and then we get into the fall where it comes into lack of trucking, the logistics are just off, big volume in sales, where we're going to see that market probably back off $10 to $12. They're historic sellers. They pull them off the cow in late October, November, and they haul them to the barn. There's always going to be those guys, and that's just their marketing plan. And so we're probably going to see that big influx of calves and the pressure on the market. So if I were to call it straight out, I think calves will probably be, I'd say they're going to be in line right here with what we've seen over the summer video sales. But I think that we're just going to get that pressure going through the fall. And so it's going to be lower than it was last year. But going forward, I think 21 and 22, I think that we start to get where we're actually tight on yearlings going in off grass, and it's going to lead to people buying more calves. And I think we're into stronger markets above that $2 mark here in 21, 22.
Do you have any closing statements you would like to make about the cattle markets?
If I look at it, the one thing that we need here is leverage, and we just can't go out and have knee-jerk reactions to everything. I think it's incredible to see people's efforts in this industry, and I really commend some people that are stepping out and saying, I'm from this region, and I don't care what you say from that other region. I'm going to do what I think is right, and I'm going to step up. I don't care how big you are. I think it's great that people are doing that. It shows the fight that we have in this industry, and so, do I believe in every one of their causes? Probably not. I think there's some crusades out there, but I'm damn glad to see that the industry's kept up its character through this whole pandemic.